It is 3 in the morning. Outside, the temperature has dropped to 51 below zero. The kind of cold that splits wooden fence posts down the middle. The kind of cold that turns diesel fuel to gel in the tank. The kind of cold that kills a man who underestimates it. And 1 mile down the road, behind a dark window with no electric meter on the wall, and no gas line running to the foundation, a family of 7 is sleeping without a single blanket plugged into anything. No furnace cycling on and off in the basement. No utility company involved in their survival tonight. Not in any way. They are warm because of a decision made when this land was still a British colony. And in the next 20 minutes, you are going to find out exactly what that decision was. My name is Jacob Brenman. I grew up 40 minutes from the largest Amish settlement in the world, Holmes County, Ohio. I spent the first 32 years of my life paying heating bills, like everyone else. January, February, March. The statements arriving in the mailbox like a tax I never voted for. Then one winter, a storm knocked out power to my county for 11 days. My house became unlivable by day 3. My neighbor, an Amish farmer named Daniel Graber, never noticed the outage at all. That 11-day stretch changed every assumption I had ever made about how a house is supposed to work in winter. By the end of this video, you are going to know 3 specific things. First, the structural principle that keeps an Amish farmhouse warm when the temperature outside would shut down a modern neighborhood. Second, why that principle was quietly written out of American building codes over a 50-year period, and who benefited when it disappeared. Third, what you can do this weekend, inside the house you already own, using materials that cost less than a dinner out. To start recovering what was taken from you, stay with me, because the last part is the part the heating industry does not want you to think about. The winter of 2 years ago was the coldest January on record in northeastern Ohio in 40 years. I drove out to Daniel Graber's property on the 9th of that month. The thermometer on my dashboard read -23. The road crews had stopped salting because the salt was not working. I knocked on Daniel's door at 7 in the morning. He answered in his shirt sleeves, no sweater, no thick wool socks pulled up over his ankles, shirt sleeves, like a man answering the door in September. I walked inside and stood in his kitchen for a full 10 minutes before I said anything. The floor was warm through the soles of my boots. The walls, when I pressed my palm flat against the plaster, felt like the side of a mug that had been sitting near a fire. There was a stove in the front room. I could see it from where I stood. It was not roaring. It was not even particularly loud. It was doing something closer to a slow, quiet exhale. I asked Daniel what he had burned that morning to get the house to that temperature. He looked at me the way a man looks at someone who has just asked why the sky is blue. He said, I burned last night's fire. He had not lit a single piece of wood that morning. The house was warm on stored heat from a fire he had built the night before and let burn down to ash by 10 o'clock. That is the first thing you need to understand about the Amish approach to winter. They do not chase heat. They store it. Modern American homes are thermal disasters. I do not mean that as an insult. I mean it as a simple engineering description of what happens inside a stick-frame house with 6-inch walls on a cold night. Heat is generated by a furnace. That heat rises, moves through ducts, enters rooms, and immediately begins escaping through walls, windows, gaps around outlets, and the thin band of space where your ceiling meets your exterior wall. The furnace kicks back on. The cycle repeats every 12 to 18 minutes all night long. You are not heating a home. You are filling a leaking container and billing yourself for the leak. The Amish understood this problem before the United States had a president. The solution they brought with them, from the German-speaking regions of Europe, in the early 1700s, is called a masonry heater. It is not a fireplace. A fireplace is a decorative heat thief. An open fireplace pulls warm air out of your living room and sends it up the chimney at a rate that actually leaves the room colder than it would have been with no fire at all. Measured efficiency of a standard open fireplace sits at roughly 8 to 12%. A masonry heater operates on a completely different principle. It is a large structure, built from dense stone or brick, sometimes weighing close to 4,000 pounds. Designed not to radiate heat immediately, like a campfire, but to absorb heat deep into its mass and release it slowly, steadily, over the following 12 to 20 hours. You build one intense, clean fire. 90 minutes, maybe 2 armfuls of dry hardwood. Then you let it burn completely down. The stone has absorbed the thermal energy of that fire, the way a cast iron pan absorbs heat from a burner. And for the next full day, it gives that heat back to the room at a slow, even rate that a thermostat cannot replicate, because a thermostat does not store anything. It only reacts. Efficiency ratings on traditional masonry heaters, documented in independent university testing, come in consistently between 80 and 92%. Your gas furnace, if it is modern and well-maintained, runs at roughly 80% on its best day, and loses efficiency every year it ages. The masonry heater does not age the same way. The Graeber family's heater was built by Daniel's grandfather. It has never been serviced. It has never needed to be. But the masonry heater is only one part of what makes these houses work. The walls are the other part. And this is where the story gets uncomfortable. A traditional Amish farmhouse built in the old method has exterior walls between 16 and 22 inches thick. Stone in the older structures. Double brick construction in the more recent ones. Either way, you are talking about a wall that weighs approximately as much as a small car per linear foot. That wall does not just block the cold. It stores heat the same way the masonry heater does. During daylight hours, even weak winter sunlight striking the south-facing surface warms the outer stone layer. That warmth slowly migrates inward through the mass of the wall and enters the house as radiant heat through the interior plaster surface. Hours after the sun has gone down, the house is, in the most literal sense, a slow-release heat storage system that happens to have rooms inside it. Now contrast that with the wall in your house. 5.5 inches of empty space filled with fiberglass batting, a thin layer of drywall on the inside, a thin layer of sheathing and siding on the outside. When it is -20 outside and 70 inside, that wall is doing almost nothing to slow the transfer. You are just burning more gas to compensate. The Amish did not call this principle anything. They did not have a marketing term for it. They simply called it building properly. It was not until the 1970s that academic researchers began arriving in Lancaster County and Holmes County with instruments and clipboards, and came away shaking their heads at thermal performance numbers that no modern construction method was achieving. In 1979, the United States Department of Energy commissioned a formal research study examining pre-industrial American housing stock across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. 41 surviving structures, built between 1740 and 1860. The conclusion, buried in a government archive that almost nobody outside of academic circles has ever opened, was that the average pre-industrial farmhouse, operated as it was designed to be operated, required between 60 and 75% less energy to maintain livable winter temperatures than a house built in 1975. 60 to 75% less. That study was filed. That study was archived. That study was never used to change a single line of the building code that governs how American homes are constructed today. Think about what that means in practical terms. If the average American household spends $1,800 a year on heating, a house built to pre-industrial Amish standards in the same location, in the same weather, would cost that household somewhere between $400 and $700 annually. Over a 30-year mortgage, the difference is between $30,000 and $42,000. That money went to utility companies. It did not go to your children. It did not go to your savings. It did not go to a piece of land. The regulatory changes that made masonry heaters and thick-wall construction functionally impossible in most new American residential construction happened gradually across the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s. Insurance underwriters began flagging masonry heaters as non-standard. Mortgage lenders began treating certain traditional construction methods as value-reducing. The building code infrastructure that emerged from the post-war housing boom assumed, as its baseline, that every home would be connected to a centralized energy supply and would heat all of its square footage, simultaneously at all times. That assumption was an enormous financial benefit to the companies supplying that energy. The Amish were largely unaffected because their communities built on private agricultural land under religious accommodation provisions. They kept doing what worked. The rest of the country was quietly steered away from it. Here is the part that matters most. If you already own a house, and you are not in a position to tear down your walls and rebuild them in stone, the Amish system evolved in layers. Families added pieces over generations. You could do the same thing over the next 3 winters without a single permit, without a single contractor, and without spending more than most people spend on a month of takeout food. Layer 1. Zone the house. Free. This weekend. The Amish have never in 300 years paid to heat a hallway. They heat the room where people actually live. The rest of the house is allowed to be cold. Pick the room where your family spends winter evenings. Close every heating vent in every room that is not actively occupied during the day. Hang heavy curtains or thick wool blankets in every doorway leading out of that room. At night, turn the thermostat down to 55. Sleep with bedroom doors closed. This single change costs nothing. In most houses, it reduces heating bills between 28 and 38% in the first month. I did this in my own house the winter after I started spending time with Daniel Graeber. My January bill dropped by $91. From hanging fabric in doorways, Layer 2 introduced thermal mass. Under $10, you cannot rebuild your walls. But you can bring thermal mass into your living room in a concentrated form. Take 6 to 8 red clay bricks, Standard construction bricks from any hardware store or salvage yard. Place them on or directly beside your heat source for 2 to 3 hours during the evening. A wood stove surface, a gas fireplace hearth, even a warm air register on the floor. Wrap each brick in a dense cloth, wool if you have it, flannel if you do not. Place them at the foot of each bed 30 minutes before anyone goes to sleep. Those bricks will radiate steady, gentle heat for 6 to 8 hours. This is not a folk remedy. This is thermal mass storage on a small scale. The same principle that makes a 4,000-pound masonry heater work, applied to something that costs less than a cup of coffee per brick. Amish families were putting heated bricks in children's beds in unheated sleeping rooms in 1830. The physics has not changed. Layer 3. The sleeping system. Under $300. Once. The Amish do not heat bedrooms. They never have. They sleep warm because of how they sleep, not because of what is running in the basement. A traditional Amish winter quilt is not a decorative item. It is an engineered thermal system. Multiple layers of carded wool batting, enclosed in tightly woven cotton, hand-stitched at close intervals to prevent the wool from migrating. Wool retains its insulating value even when it absorbs moisture from breathing and body heat. Synthetic fill does not. A properly constructed Amish winter quilt keeps a sleeping adult comfortable in a room that has dropped to 38 degrees Fahrenheit. You can purchase one from an Amish maker for between $200 and $400. You can make one with basic sewing skills and materials for under $90. Either way, the quilt eliminates the need to heat your bedroom at all, which, in most houses, removes another 15 to 20% from the monthly heating bill. 3 layers, free, $10, and one purchase under $300. Combined reduction in most houses, somewhere between 45 and 60% off your annual heating cost. Not next year. Starting now. I want to tell you about the moment this stopped being curiosity for me and became something I felt obligated to share. I was sitting in a county archive in eastern Ohio on a Tuesday afternoon in February, 3 winters ago. A librarian had pulled a translated collection of early Pennsylvania German settler records, assembled by a regional historical society in the late 1960s, and published in an edition small enough that the entire print run could fit in a school gymnasium. Inside that collection was a detailed account written in 1744 by a Mennonite settler who had arrived in Pennsylvania. In the 1710s, he described, in careful, practical language, the heating arrangement in his stone farmhouse, the fire chamber, the thick stone collar surrounding the flue, the way the smoke was forced to travel a longer, slower path before exiting, transferring heat into the stone rather than wasting it into the sky above the roofline. He was describing the functional principle of masonry, heating the way a farmer describes planting corn, not as an invention, as an obvious thing that sensible people simply did. And I sat there in that archive thinking about the house I grew up in. The drafty colonial-style house my father heated, with a gas furnace that he replaced twice during my childhood. The heating bills my mother kept in a shoebox in the kitchen drawer because she said he needed to see the pattern to understand how much it cost. The pattern was always the same. Every January, every February, money leaving, cold staying. The knowledge to change that had been sitting in a county archive 40 minutes from my front door for over 50 years. That is not an accident. That is the result of an industry infrastructure that profits from your not knowing. If you have watched this far, I do not think you stumbled onto this video by accident. I think you are the kind of person who has already noticed that the standard answers to ordinary problems often benefit someone other than you. That the systems you were handed were designed with someone else's interests in mind. That the knowledge your great-grandparents carried was not lost. It was replaced, on purpose, by something more profitable. The Amish never agreed to that replacement. And tonight, somewhere in Wayne County or Geauga County or Lancaster County, a grandfather is sitting in a warm room in a house that has not had a utility bill in for generations. He lit one fire this evening. He will not light another one until tomorrow night. His children are asleep in unheated rooms under quilts his wife made by hand. The temperature outside is dropping towards 0. He is not worried about it. Start with the bricks tonight. Hang the blankets this weekend. Look at your heating bill and understand for the first time that most of what you are paying is the price of a system that was chosen for you, not by you. Leave me a comment below. Tell me one thing. Is there something in your grandparents' house, a thick wall, an old chimney, a basement setup you never understood, that makes sense to you now for the first time? I believe almost every family in this country has a memory of these systems somewhere in their past, before the old ways were phased out and the monthly bills were phased in. Tell me what you remember. I read every comment. If this gave you something useful, subscribe. We are not building a following here. We are recovering a body of knowledge that was deliberately allowed to disappear and putting it back into the hands of the people it belonged to. Next week, I am going to take you underground. The Amish have been storing an entire winter's worth of food without electricity or refrigeration for 3 centuries, using a chamber that stays within 3 degrees of 40 Fahrenheit year-round, whether it is January or July outside. The design is documented in a Pennsylvania almanac from the 1790s. I am going to show you the exact dimensions, the exact depth, and the exact material lining the walls that makes the temperature stable. You were never meant to be dependent on a grocery store's cold chain to feed your family through winter. That knowledge existed. It still exists. I will see you next week.